All right, let's talk about mastering. You've probably heard the term, and it might sound a little mysterious, like some kind of dark art. But today, we're gonna pull back the curtain. We're gonna break it all down into a simple mini course, so even if you're totally new to this, you'll get the main ideas. So let me ask you this. Have you ever worked on a song, you finish it, you're super proud of it, but then you play it right after a track on Spotify and yours just sounds kind of weak, a little quiet? It doesn't have that same punch? Well, that secret ingredient you're missing, that's professional mastering. Take a look at this. On the left, that's pretty much what a raw mix looks like. You know, the volume is all over the place, maybe it's even hitting the red and distorting. But on the right, that's our goal. It's polished, the volume is under control, and it's ready for any streaming platform. Mastering is the bridge that gets you from that messy before to that polished after. Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we'll tackle why we even need to master in the first place, the core problem. Then we'll get into the #1 rule, taming your levels. After that, we'll learn how to actually see our sound, not just hear it. Then comes the fun part, adding that final polish with a tool called a limiter. And we'll wrap it all up with one single golden rule that, honestly, changes everything. So, first things first, the core problem. Why is this even a thing? Well, it really boils down to how we make music these days. Well, here's the deal. So many of our modern tools, virtual instruments, sample packs, they're all designed to sound amazing right out of the box. And amazing usually just means loud. So what happens? You start layering all these loud sounds, and pretty soon they all slam into your main output, overloading it and creating this awful digital distortion called clipping. And with everything already cranked to the max, you have zero space left to work with. No headroom, as we call it. It makes getting a good, clean mix, well, almost impossible. So how in the world do we fix this loud mess? This brings us to probably the single most important rule in all of mixing and mastering. You've got to tame your levels. And the pro term for this whole process is gainstaging. So what is gainstaging? It's really simple. It just means setting the right volume for every single track before you even start mixing or adding any cool effects. It's all about creating that headroom we were just talking about. And here's a fun fact. The term is exactly the same in Italian and English. Gainstaging. So what's the magic number we're shooting for? This might actually surprise you. We're not trying to make things loud yet. The goal for each individual track is an average level of around -18 decibels. Now, why that number? It actually comes from the old world of big analog recording studios. That was the sweet spot that gave engineers the perfect amount of headroom and made all their gears sound its best. It still works perfectly in the digital world today. So how do you actually do this? Well, in most music software, you've got a few options. You can use something called clip gain to turn down the audio file itself, or you can use the pre-gain knob on the track, which adjusts the level before any of your effects. You could even draw in super detailed volume changes for things that get loud and quiet, like a vocal. It doesn't matter which one you use. The goal is always to get that average level hanging out around -18. All right, quick pop quiz. We've just gone over it, but what would you say is the #1 main goal of gainstaging? It's all about creating space. That's it. Proper gainstaging makes sure nothing is distorting and just gives your entire mix room to breathe. This right here is the absolute foundation of a clean, pro-sounding track. Okay, so we've been talking about hitting these specific numbers, these target levels, but how do you really know if you're getting it right? I mean, you can't always just trust your ears. This is where you need to actually see your sound. And this quote just hits the nail on the head. Our ears get tired, they can fool us, especially when you've been working on a track for hours. That's exactly why the pros rely on visual tools, like the Supervision plugin in Cubase, to get a totally objective, accurate look at what's really going on with the audio. So what are we looking for on these meters? Well, the first big one is integrated loudness. In Italian, that's loudness integrata. It's measured in something called lufs. Just think of lufs as a way of measuring the average perceived loudness over your entire song. For streaming services like Spotify, the magic number, the target, is right around -14 lufs. The second key metric is true peak. This one's different. It measures the absolute loudest single point in your entire song. It's so precise, it even catches peaks that happen between the digital samples. The crucial rule here is you have to keep this number below -1 decibel. If you don't, you risk distortion when your song gets converted to an MP3 or streamed online. All right, We have created our headroom with gain staging, and we're using our meters to watch our loudness and our peaks. Now it's time for the final bit of magic. We're going to apply that final polish with a tool called a limiter. So what is a limiter? Sometimes people call it a maximizer. Basically, it does two really important jobs at once. First, it acts like an unbreakable brick wall. It sets a ceiling, and it absolutely will not let the audio signal go past that point. And second, at the same time, it pushes the overall volume of your track right up against that ceiling, making everything feel louder and more powerful, but without causing that nasty digital distortion. So here's how you actually use it. First, you set the output, or the ceiling, to control your true peak. Remember that? We'll set it to -1.0 dB to be safe. Then, you start increasing the input, or optimize knob. This pushes the whole track's volume up. And as you do that, you'll see a meter called gain reduction, or GR, start to move. That meter shows you exactly how hard the limiter is working to squash down any peaks that try to smash through your ceiling. Okay, let's focus on that gain reduction meter for a second. If you look over and you see that meter is just going crazy, what is that actually telling you about what's happening to your song? It means that limiter is working way too hard. It's basically slamming on the brakes constantly. And when it does that, it crushes all the natural energy, the dynamics of your song. It makes it sound flat, lifeless, just squashed. A good rule of thumb is to try and keep that gain reduction meter from going much past -4 decibels. That way, you keep the song's energy alive. And this brings us right to our final section, and honestly, the most important idea of this whole explainer. If you see your limiter working way too hard and crushing your song, what is the absolute best way to fix it? So the problem is pretty simple. The mix you're sending into the limiter is just too loud to begin with. Now, your first instinct might be to just grab the input knob on the limiter and turn it down. And you could do that, but trust me, there is a much, much better way. And here it is, the mastering golden rule. Instead of making the limiter do all the heavy lifting, you do this. Simply lower the main volume fader of your entire mix before the signal ever gets to the limiter. This means the limiter doesn't have to work as hard. It can do its job more gently, more transparently. You'll still get your track loud, but it will sound so much better with way more punch and clarity. And that's our crash course. So I'm gonna leave you with a challenge. Now that you know about gain staging, loudness, and how a limiter works, go put on some music. Really listen to it. See if you can start to hear the difference between a really great, dynamic, powerful master and one that just sounds crushed and flat. I think you're gonna be surprised by what you can hear now.